Welcome to this National Town Hall on Scams and Older Adults. We are recording and we'll share the recording once it's posted to the CFPB's library of recorded webinars on elder justice topics. You can use the Q&A function here in Teams Town Hall to ask for help with technical difficulties during today's webinar. And we will also post notes and links to the group in that Q&A panel. Time permitting, we will have some time to answer participant questions, so the Q&A panel is also a place you can submit your questions to be considered for that segment. This presentation is being made by a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau representative on behalf of the Bureau. It does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice of the CFPB. Any opinions or views stated by the presenter are the presenter's own and may not represent the Bureau's views. Deborah Royster is an Assistant Director with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She leads the CFPB's Office for Older Americans and will open today's event.
Welcome everyone to this National Town Hall on Scams and Older Adults. Elder fraud is one of the most critical risks facing older Americans. Scams in particular are devastating to the financial security of older adults. We all know someone who has experienced fraud or scams. Researchers conservatively estimate that there are at least 4 million financial exploitation cases per year for people 60 and older. And according to one study, 37% of older adults were victims of elder financial exploitation in a 5-year period. That's more than a third of older adults. Estimates of annual financial losses from elder financial exploitation vary from $2.9 billion to $36.5 billion. And we know that fraud is underreported. In the Federal Trade Commission's recently released older adults report to Congress, they adjusted to account for underreporting and extrapolated to estimate a colossal $158.3 billion in total losses in 2020, $61.5 billion coming from older victims. Retirement savings and other resources that people have earned over a lifetime and depend on can be gone in an instant. And that is why the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the FDIC, and AARP are working together to fight elder fraud. This work includes putting information and tools in your hands as individuals and community-based organizations. You can join in this effort to benefit your communities, your neighbors, your loved ones. The CFPB is also fighting elder financial exploitation through enforcement. I'll highlight one case, the Brightspeed case, as an example. In the Brightspeed case, the CFPB held a payment processor accountable for allowing tech support scammers to use their digital payment platform to scam older consumers. The CFPB's settlement ensures that Brightspeed will never again participate in the payment processing industry. In addition, in July 2024, the CFPB distributed over $53 million in payments to consumers who were harmed by Brightspeed. This case shows the CFPB's determination to hold predatory payment processors like Brightspeed and other bad actors accountable. This work is important because scams are happening everywhere. Recently, perpetrators have been targeting older people in my neighborhood. Scammers offered fake investments in gold bars, and they intimidated victims, resulting in devastating financial losses to some of my neighbors. Other scams take advantage of communities that have been hit by natural disasters, sometimes disguising their scams as insurance or disaster assistance. It can truly happen to anyone, anywhere. On behalf of the CFPB and our partners at the FDIC and AARP, we thank you for joining us today. Working together, nationally, locally, and in our own lives, we can protect against these financial threats. And now I would like to introduce you to today's presenters. Julie M. Strandlie is an attorney and elder fraud prevention advocate. Her tireless work to combat scams targeting older adults is motivated by an experience with scams within her own family. And we'll hear more about this from Julie. Kathy Stokes is Director of Fraud Prevention Programs for the AARP Fraud Watch Network. The work that Kathy leads educates older adults on the risks that fraud presents to their financial security. Ron Jauregui is a community affairs specialist in the FDIC's Division of Depositor and Consumer Protection. Ron is the FDIC's agency lead for the Money Smart for Older Adults Scam Awareness Program. And last but certainly not least, my colleague, Lisa Schifferle, is a senior policy analyst with the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. Lisa leads the Managing Someone Else's Money Financial Caregiving Program, and she is also the CFPB's agency lead for the Money Smart for Older Adults Scam Awareness Program. First, we'll hear from Julie Strandlie. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in the National Town Hall. My name is Julie Strandlie. I'm a Virginia lawyer who spent most of my career advocating for the public interest. Like many of you, I'm also a member of the sandwich generation. Next slide, please. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my family's story and highlight the many missed opportunities financial institutions had to stop the crime and to protect my mother's life savings. You hear stories every day about people losing millions of their retirement savings, which is horrible and unacceptable. However, there are thousands and thousands more people whose stories are not being told, like my mom's, who lost $80,000. She did not lose a lot number-wise, but she lost everything. And this is far more common. My family's story focuses on this theme: mandatory reporting, financial institution policy and procedure reform, and staff training like that offered by AARP's Bank Safe program can help save a vulnerable person's life savings. Next slide, please. Our story begins 5 years ago in November 2019, but the ramifications impact us every day. I had just reviewed my mom's checking account and all was well. However, the credit union did not have text notifications, so I could not track all transactions in real time. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas 2019, my then 85-year-old mother was the victim of a tech support, computer ransom, gift card scam. This is all too common. If you click the wrong link, your computer explodes with flashing graphics and pounding voices saying that there's a virus. This has probably happened to every one of us, but we react to that in a different manner. There's a number to call for help, but it's not the real Microsoft. So what happened next? She gave criminals access to her computer. They promptly locked it up and demanded payment in gift cards to unlock it. She panicked. Her photos and remembrances were on the computer. In this moment of panic, she completely forgot that I had everything backed up with an online software package. That one phone call changed everything. She was no match for the criminals on the phone, who convinced her to give them access to her computer and then demanded payment in cash and gift cards to unlock it. They manipulated her computer to make it appear that they were depositing money into her account, and then they asked for it back. Next slide, please. That's when the cycle began. Over the next month, from November 27th until Christmas Eve, they convinced her to transfer money from her investment account, purchase gift cards, and withdraw cash from her bank account. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at what happened over the next 3 weeks. My mom was an account clerk, and despite the criminals' demands that she destroy all records, she kept them. So what you're seeing is my reconstruction of the crime. I turned all of this over to the police back in 2019. Next slide, please. Best Buy is a favorite gift card for cyber criminals. My mom bought $36,000 in Best Buy gift cards, $2,000 at a time for days straight from the same store. Many purchases were recorded in her frequent buyer account, and while Best Buy has a sign cautioning about gift card purchases, that alone will not break the cycle for a vulnerable crime victim. Next slide, please. Criminals used the numbers and pins to buy thousands of dollars worth of Apple products. No ID, no cash, no other credit. Criminals walked out of the Best Buys up and down the East Coast with thousands of dollars in tech products, paid for by my mom. Next slide, please. Target is another favorite gift card for criminals. My mom bought $18,000 worth of gift cards, including $4,000 on Christmas Eve. I was out of town returning later that day. Please look at the text with a criminal that my mom had. This breaks my heart every time I think about her sitting alone in the Target parking lot on Christmas Eve. Next slide, please. I was able to track down where the cards were used and recover about $828 that a criminal had not yet drained from the 2 cards. And these are the locations where the cards were used. Next slide, please. How are these gift card purchases funded? Wire transfers representing her life savings were deposited into her Senate Credit Union checking account. And she was using the credit and debit cards to make thousands of dollars in purchases at Best Buy and Target. $1,000 and mostly $2,000 for each purchase. She also visited the branch in person to withdraw cash 4 times, telling them that she was using the cash to pay for her granddaughter's college tuition. That really doesn't pass the laugh test. Had the teller alerted the supervisor to review the account, they would have immediately shown that something was really wrong and that she was likely a crime victim. This chart shows how much she spent and how much would have been saved if the teller had made an alert when she came in to withdraw cash the first time. Next slide, please. My mom received an email fraud alert that by this time, $45,000 had already been charged, and she was convinced the criminals would eventually return her money. The cash withdrawals and the $45,000 in Best Buy and Target charges should have set off alarms, causing them to block the charges, file a report with Adult Protective Services, or just call me because my name was actually on that checking account. Next slide, please. I also heard from some of the banks, and they blamed the victim for these transactions. So after initially being contacted by Adult Protective Services, I believe that Wells Fargo had reported her, my mom called them back and admitted the next day that she was in fact a crime victim. As you can see from this email, the police informed us that they could take a report, but there was basically nothing that they could do. This response emphasizes how important it is to stop the money from leaving the accounts. Once it's gone, it's gone. We must also ensure that APS has the tools and the funding that they need to fight cybercrime, which is very different than someone losing their money through a trust. It's fast and it's gone. So how did this end? The credit union finally contacted me the day after Christmas on December 26th. We went into their office. I was armed with an active power of attorney, which I thankfully had in my safe tucked away since 2002. Without this POA, the scam would have continued. My mom was motivated to continue buying gift cards. Just send them another $3,000 and they'll return all my money. I've heard from friends whose aging parents have been similarly caught up, and it's like a trance. Thankfully, once our family knew, she let me take her computer, which we replaced, her cell phone, I changed her numbers, and her car keys to keep her from going to buy more gift cards. This took about 2 weeks to change. I also changed her email addresses. Next slide, please. What is the impact? Not only did she lose her life savings, but this destroyed her credit. To this day, the Senate Credit Union and Wells Fargo continue to report missed payments and balance owed. Wells Fargo reported her to APS, but did not block charges and even let her exceed the limit. She lost $80,000 through her credit union checking, and they want more. Next slide, please. How many of you have seen the movies Thelma or the Beekeeper? In closing, we need more than just characters in a movie where the plot involves financial scam victims to protect our families and our life savings. Many thanks to the CFPB, FDIC, AARP, and others for their work in stopping scams and protecting vulnerable persons. And now I'm honored to turn it over to Kathy Stokes with AARP.
Julie, thank you so much for sharing your story, your mom's story. I think that in this space of fraud victimization, the biggest impact can happen when people tell their stories. I mean, I feel crushed for you and for her, and sad that this is what's happening over and over, thousands of times a day, millions of times a year, and we really do need to do more as a society to address this. If we could go to the next slide, Ben. I just wanted to tell you first a little bit about the Fraud Watch Network program that I run at AARP. We are on the front with education and on the back with supporting victims who have experienced fraud. We have a great website at the AARP Fraud Watch Network. On there, you can sign up for bi-weekly watchdog alerts by email or text, just to basically remind you fraud is out there. And when you get that, maybe that's a reminder for you to talk to your family, your friends, your network about it. We need a national dialogue to better protect one another. We have a really great podcast called The Perfect Scam. It is that sort of true crime genre, but it's from the impact on the victim. It just won another award yesterday, and I highly encourage you to take a listen. We also have 53 state offices with AARP around the country, and each of them has volunteer fraud fighters that go out into community, often with partners like CFPB, for example, to get out there in front of older adults and talk to them about the scams that are happening and how to prevent it. We have we do coverage in the AARP Bulletin. If any of you are members, it's one of the hottest reads from the perspective, at least, of our membership. And if we can go to the next slide, I want to tell you a little bit about an amazing program that we have in victim support. I would urge you all to write down this number and to write down this website. You can give it to anybody. You don't have to be a member of AARP. You don't have to be 50 or older to take advantage of these resources, and understand that while older adults are compounded with their with the impact on fraud, it does happen to everybody at every age. Our Fraud Watch Network helpline is available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 days a week. People can call there to report a scam that they didn't experience, but they want people to know about it. We share that with the Federal Trade Commission. You can call to report that or ask, that letter that you get from Publishers Clearinghouse saying you won $2 million in a car. You can call the 877 number and talk to a human. Is this legitimate? What do I look for? And sadly, of the 100,000 calls we got last year, so many, too many of them, were actually from victims or victims' family members trying to deal in the aftermath. We started about 3 or 4 years ago with the peer support program too, online. You can learn more about it at aarp.org/fraud support. But I think it's pretty unique. 7 or 8 people get on at one time on a Zoom session, and there's a trained facilitator, and they talk to each other, and they help each other understand that it wasn't their fault. They help each other understand that these are criminal enterprises, and they're not alone. People all over the country, all over the world are being targeted. Next slide, please. When Deborah made reference to this, I just really want to point out, we really don't know how much fraud is out there. But if you add up what we're hearing from 2023, from the Federal Trade Commission, from the Internet Crime Complaint Center at the FBI, from FinCEN, which is part of Treasury, from Javelin Strategy and Research, you add all of those up, and that's still not telling you how much is out there. But as Deborah mentioned, and if you just click that one more time there, Ben, you'll see the number that they came up with just last week and produced $158.3 billion stolen in fraud in 2023 alone. This is unacceptable, and we have to do so much more about it. Next slide. And I want to help you understand why people like Julie's mom experience this. These criminals have a playbook. Their goal is to get that target into a heightened emotional state, what they refer to as the ether, because they know that when we are hit with something that's highly emotional, our brain function is to bypass logical thinking and go right to, I got to solve this. So the criminals call it the ether. Academics refer to it as the amygdala hijack. This is a real thing. Next slide. And so what we've come to understand about this criminal's playbook is there's basically three elements to about 80% of the scams that are out there. And it's that unexpected contact that yields a heightened emotion and contains urgency. And if we can train our brains that these three things together equals a scam, then we can also train our brains on what to do about it. More to come on that later this year. But all of this is to say it's not the victim's fault. This is a crime. These are criminal enterprises, and we really do need to be treating the victims with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. Next slide. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to be talking about some things all of us can do starting today if we're not doing. And if we are doing them, then let's get our moms and dads and aunts and uncles doing them too. There are a lot of things we can do out there to sort of harden our own defenses. I have a top 5 list on this slide. It might be different if Lisa was talking to you or if Deborah was talking to you. But in my mind, the 5 most important things are right in front of you. We do need to do a better job on our passwords. It's not our fault. We got stuck with the system of passwords, and now we have to have a unique and impossible to break password for every single online account we have. It's pretty much impossible. And the best thing to do, I think, is to adopt a password manager to help you manage all of that. So you're only remembering one password that is the password to the vault, an encrypted vault that all of the other passwords are in. Multi-factor authentication. This is becoming much more common to see, but it's that third piece of information that you get from an email or a text or an app that after you put your username and your password in, there's that extra verification step. Reviewing our credit reports is something not a lot of us do, but it's easy and it's free. If you go to annualcreditreport.com, you can request your report. And I think right now you can request them online on a weekly basis ever since COVID. But anyway, you get a chance to look at the agencies of record. That's Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. Look and see what's on your credit report. If anything looks fishy, you can make a call and try to get that sorted out. It can help you identify if somebody has stolen parts of your identity and are trying to use it to open accounts in your name. And then freezing our credit. If you're not just about to buy a house or a car or put a kid through school, we can freeze our credit with those same agencies for free. This means nobody, not even you, can open a credit line in your name. You can unfreeze it if you need to and freeze it back. It's gotten a lot easier over the years, but I highly recommend that. We need to be doing automatic software updates. When you get that notification on your phone that says it's time to update, it's not, sometimes it's just small things, and sometimes it's because there's a known fraud vulnerability. So make sure you're adopting those updates, and the same with your antivirus software. And we just can't trust incoming communications anymore. So let's not click on the links. Let's not answer unknown calls. Next slide, please. We should be shredding all of our sensitive mail because there are still people out there dumpster diving. There's a rash for the last couple of years of check fraud, check theft through the mail. So go into the post office. If you are sending checks to anyone, deposit it inside the post office. I know it sounds antithetical. You should be banking online, because if you're not, then that leaves a criminal an opportunity to set up that account and take over your account. But it also allows you to set up notifications when activity is happening on your account. If you're a P2P app user, Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, that's great, but use it with people that you know and you trust. Otherwise, you just don't have the protections there. If you're on public Wi-Fi, make sure you have a virtual private network loaded onto your device. If you don't log into anything, because it's open season on your data. And when you set your Wi-Fi router up at home, make sure you change the password to it, because I think that's just too easy to hack into. And one more list of even more protective actions. Secure your social media accounts. They don't come to you secure. Go find the privacy settings and shut it down so only friends and family see what you're posting. Don't trust ads on social media. Most of the people that report online scams to us are because they clicked on a link on a social media ad and they never got the product that they thought they were buying. IRS now offers PINs to make sure that when you file your tax return, it's actually you. Go to irs.gov to learn more about that. Federal Trade Commission has a do not call registry. Put all your numbers on it. It stays there permanently. Add moms, add dads, add yourself. It's not going to stop the criminals, but it's going to slow down that telemarketing traffic if you don't have a relationship with that company. Create a backup of your data, like Julie said. She did that for her mom. And it's really important to have that if something like that happened to Julie's mom, it happened to you. And there's also a product that's called ID.me, and it's starting to be adopted by federal agencies and actually some companies where it's a single sign-on. It's kind of cumbersome. The veterans have been using it for their benefits for a while. I believe the Social Security Administration is or has turned to ID.me, and this might be an easier way to handle the various logons that we're all dealing with. And now it is my distinct pleasure to turn things over to Lisa Schifferle with the CFPB and Ron Jauregui from FDIC. Take it away, folks.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thanks for all those really helpful resources and tips. And hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Schifferle with the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. And with me is Ron Jauregui from the FDIC. Together, we're going to talk to you about Money Smart for Older Adults, which is a joint CFPB and FDIC Train the Trainer scam prevention curriculum. I'm going to start by sharing a little bit of background on scam trends, and then Ron will tell you about the Money Smart curriculum, and we'll both review some common scams, including red flags and steps you can take to protect yourself. Finally, we'll share some free resources that you can use to help others in your community to avoid frauds and scams. So let's start with some trends about scams. You already heard from Kathy and Deborah about the big picture numbers about scams and fraud, that $158 billion number. But I'm going to highlight some trends related to age and scams. And this slide shows interesting data about older adults and scams from the FTC's Consumer Sentinel. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, it's actually younger adults who are more likely to report losing money to scams than older people. As this slide shows, 44% of people in their 20s reported a loss, compared with 25% of people in their 70s. So that dispels the notion of the vulnerable older victim. Another important thing to note is if you look at the right side of the slide, is that when older adults do lose money, they report much higher dollar losses than younger people. So on the right, you'll see a median loss of $1,450 for people over age 80, compared to only about $480 for people in their 20s. So you can see from this data why it's really important to focus on this issue of scams facing older adults. Now let's look at trends related to payment methods used to pay scammers. The left side of this chart shows how often people used a particular payment method to pay scammers, while the right side shows how much money they lost while using that particular payment method. So you can see that the most frequent methods that scammers request payment by are credit card and debit card. However, the highest dollar loss methods are bank transfers and cryptocurrency. So it's very important to be alert to these methods. When you hear about a potential scam, they can help you identify red flags of scams, as we'll discuss more in a minute. Let's also talk about contact methods. So it's important to note the contact method that scammers use to reach people. Here you'll see that email and phone are the top methods by frequency of use. But if you look at the light green line, you'll see the dollar loss is highest when scammers contact you through social media, online ads, or pop-ups, or websites and apps. So it's important to use a lot of those protections that Kathy mentioned, and important for us to share these trends because it helps us all better spot these scams in our communities. So now I'm going to turn it to Ron to tell you a bit about Money Smart for Older Adults, and then he and I will get into some specific scam prevention tips.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Well done. On behalf of the FDIC, I'm here to tell you about the Money Smart for Older Adults program. We have a QR code on screen. You can use your phone to scan it. Next slide, please. The Money Smart for Older Adults curriculum is award-winning. The product has won the Gloria Kavanaugh Award for Excellence in Training and Education by the American Society on Aging. and it was featured in a peer review article entitled The Money Smart for Older Adults Program, a qualitative study of participants' financial well-being. That appeared in the Journal of Gerontological Social Work. Participants in the study reported that the curriculum helped them increase awareness of their financial well-being and supported their financial decision-making. The product, MSOA, has been distributed in hard copy to over 1.5 million end users who we know of. The ABA Foundation recently found that MSOA is the #1 used instructor-led curricula aimed at preventing financial abuse against older adults after bank proprietary products. Next slide, please. So what is MSOA? It was a product developed in collaboration with the CFPB, the main objective being that the program is meant to increase awareness among older adults and their caregivers on how to prevent financial exploitation, as well as provide information and tools that older adults can use for advanced planning while also making informed financial decisions. The program includes 10 topics in both English and Spanish, covering not only tips to avoid financial exploitation, but also the most common types of fraud and scams, as well as strategies to plan for unexpected life events. Although the program is developed with older adults in mind, anyone can benefit from the content to prevent becoming victims of fraud and scams. To download the product, go to FDIC.gov/MoneySmart. To get hard copies of the resource guide, go to consumerfinance.gov/MoneySmart. And there you can also find information about the Office of Older Americans. Next slide, please. Money Smart for Older Adults has 3 parts to it. An instructor guide with detailed instructions, scripts, stage direction for trainers. Secondly, a participant workbook with fillable PDFs that help people go through activities like working on a budget. And finally, a PowerPoint that aligns with the instructor guide. It's good to note that the 14 customizable modules take just 1 to 3 hours to teach. Next slide, please. So, Money Smart can be used in a variety of settings. Libraries, community centers, senior living facilities, basically anywhere adults play, work, and live. This slide here shows an innovative use of MSOA, where a group of Fairfax County high schoolers showcased an AI tool that they invented that was capable, or is capable, of detecting scams and frauds. They combined that tool with the distribution of MSOA itself. So they focus on teaching the use of their AI tool while making the topic knowledge accessible to older viewers through hard copies of the MSOA itself. Next slide, please. So there are many types of financial exploitation. Money Smart looks at both exploitation by people known to you and scams by strangers. So let's first talk about crimes that could be committed by people you know, like caregivers, family members, or an agent acting under a power of attorney. Unfortunately, studies show that financial exploitation is very often perpetuated by family members and other loved ones or caregivers. Next slide, please. So, first, let's think about financial caregivers, in-home aides, cleaners, or others who might have access to your home. People who spend time in your home might be able to view your financial records, use your money inappropriately, or cause other financial damage. You can take steps to guard against financial exploitation by someone acting as an in-home helper. Secure your private financial documents, including checks, financial statements, credit cards, related documents. Consider using a locked file cabinet to store your important information. Require receipts for purchases made by your helpers so they're not able to add extra items for themselves when they go to the store for you. Monitor your bank accounts and telephone bills. Ask for help from a third party if needed, and consider automatic bill payment systems. Also consider setting up transaction alerts that are monitored by a trusted family member or other third party. So you're putting yourself in a position to have backup to catch any problems early. Next slide, please. So Money Smart for Older Adults also talks about exploitation by strangers. Here are some types of frauds and scams that MSOA covers: phone, identity theft, lottery, home improvement, contractor scams. We'll talk about some of these today. Next slide, please. So let's look at a couple of very common imposter scams that are perpetuated by phone. The first is a family in need scam, also sometimes called a grandparent scam. Often with these kinds of scams, you get a phone call from someone who sounds panicked and says they are your relative or loved one. They may say they got into a car accident or were caught with some drugs or another law-breaking situation, and that they need money for bail or for an attorney. They typically say, "Don't tell anyone, just send the money and help me." These are some tips. Take a breath. Don't send money right away. Call back the phone number you know to be correct for your grandchild or child, or text them. If the caller says they are calling from a hospital or police department, don't trust the caller ID. It can be spoofed, meaning people often use that software to make the number appear be coming from anywhere. Kids actually use the same free software to make prank calls. And scammers use it to steal from us. Instead, look up the number or the hospital or the sheriff's office they mentioned and call that number directly. Here's some red flags. If they're asking you to pay by wiring money, putting money on a prepaid card, sending cash, buying a gift card, think twice. Next slide, please. According to the IRS, in this common telephone scam that we're going to talk about, the caller tells you you must immediately pay taxes that are owed now. In some cases, the scammers target recent immigrants, and they're told that if they don't pay their tax bill or otherwise follow instructions, they will face serious consequences, such as an arrest or deportation, or the IRS can shut down their utilities or take away their driver's license. Callers are frequently insulting or hostile to try to scare us. Tell these scammers the following, because you'll frequently face this situation. They'll tell us that we are entitled to big refunds, or that we owe money that must be paid immediately to the IRS. And when they're unsuccessful, they'll try something else. They'll call back later with a new strategy. They may spoof the IRS toll-free number on caller ID to make it appear that the IRS is calling you. The IRS never calls you. They use common names to identify themselves and fake IRS badge numbers. They may know the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. Next slide, please. So if you get a call from someone claiming to be from the IRS and you think you might owe some taxes, call the top number on this screen. Those IRS employees will tell you if there really is an issue. And if you don't owe taxes or don't think you owe taxes, or you think the party calling is not really from the IRS, call the Treasury Inspector General's office and report that incident. So now I'm going to pass it back to Lisa to cover some last few examples of some scams. Lisa?
Thanks a lot, Ron. I'm going to cover a few more common scams affecting older adults, romance scams, home contractors, and identity theft. Before I do, I just wanted to point out that all these scams that Ron and I are going over, these slides are actually from the Money Smart curriculum. So we are giving these slides not only to tell you about the substance, but also to show you that you can take these slides and use them yourself in your own community to spread knowledge about scam prevention. So let's talk about what is a romance scam. These can start online or in person, and what happens is the criminal starts what seems to be a relationship. They might start showering you with affection and attention, even sending you things, and then they start asking for money. Often they say they need money for a fake emergency situation, like an accident or a medical procedure, or sometimes they say they need money to travel to visit you. They often want you to wire the money or send it by cryptocurrency or prepaid card, or they want access to your bank account. And increasingly, they are now also telling you that they are very rich from investing in cryptocurrency and they can teach you how to invest too and become rich too. But in fact, they just direct you to send money to them. So what do these romance scammers do? If you know anyone who has been involved in a romance scam, you probably understand that these scams pull on people's heartstrings, and it can be really difficult for people to come to terms with the fact that their exciting new relationship is in fact a scam. In fact, we can see some questions coming in to this effect. So one thing you can do is it's very important for you as a friend or relative to point out to this person that you think it's a scam. These scams often do get caught by friends or relatives, these romance scams in particular. If they're not going to believe you, send them a copy of Money Smart, send them a copy of AARP's materials on romance scams so that they can see what is going on and that this is a real scam. And then maybe they will notice it later in the future and realize that's what's happening to them. So what are some red flags about this? The big tip off is that the love interest is asking for money for an emergency, for travel. And also you want to ask about how they're asking you to pay. If they're asking for wire transfer, gift cards, that's a red flag. So the main thing to remember to protect against online dating scams and romance scams is do not send money or give access to your accounts to someone you have not met in person. So if you have a friend or a family member or someone you know in your community who is doing that, please talk to them about romance scams. So what are some tips for avoiding telephone scams? We have a whole variety of phone scams that are covered in Money Smart for older adults, including sweepstakes scams. So one thing to know about that is you can't enter a sweepstakes or lottery. You can't win in a sweepstakes or lottery that you did not enter. So that sounds kind of obvious, but if you get something saying you won a lottery and you didn't actually enter it, maybe you've never even been to that country where the lottery says you're a winner, it's a scam. Also, never pay to play. A legitimate sweepstakes will not ask for money to claim your prize. Some other good common tips are just to be suspicious of pressure to send funds by wire transfer, gift cards, prepaid card, or cryptocurrency. Those can be red flags of scams from someone who calls you out of the blue. And pay attention to warning signs from your financial institution telling you that a request sounds like a scam. Sometimes these financial institutions may have encountered similar situations that may warn you about them. So those are some of the basic tips for a variety of phone scams. I do want to really touch on contractor and home improvement scams, especially after all the natural disasters that have been affecting our country in the Southeast and the recent hurricanes. These can come up anytime, but they do tend to pipe up, especially after natural disasters. And basically, people come and say they'll do repairs on your home, but then they either do shoddy or incomplete work, or sometimes they will take out a lien on your home unbeknownst to you and actually take out equity from your home in order to pay for the work. So what are some tips to avoid contractor scams? The next slide shows some tips to protect yourself from contractor scams. Some things are to ask for identification. This is especially in a natural disaster. Ask for ID from anyone who says they're from a federal government agency. Those FEMA officials out there will have IDs. Get bids from several local established contractors and try to get at least 3 bids in writing. And it's good generally to avoid contractors who go door to door, who don't have their address, phone number. Check for their licenses if you can. And absolutely don't pay in advance. Never pay with cash. And do not pay the final payment until the project is done and finished and complete to your satisfaction. Another big tip is if you do need to borrow money to pay for repairs, don't let the contractor steer you towards a particular lender. That's often how people get involved in these home equity stripping scams. Next slide. So let's talk about how to avoid identity theft. Kathy went over a lot of these tips in her portion, so I'll just quickly mention them, that it's really important to protect your social security number. She already mentioned protecting incoming and outgoing mail and signing up for direct deposit. Shredding, you can see that we have a lot of the same tips, so hopefully people will take these, adopt them. And also check your credit report annually, or even more frequently now, as Kathy pointed out, it's now possible to do for free, even more frequently, at annualcreditreport.com. Now, where do you report scams if you do experience a scam? If it's identity theft, you can go to identitytheft.gov. That's the federal government's one-stop shop for identity theft victims. It will walk you through and give you a personalized recovery plan of all the steps you need to take, and also give you an identity theft report that you can use to clean up things on your credit report that were the result of identity theft. If it is a fraud or a scam, then the place to report is reportfraud.ftc.gov. And if you have a problem with a financial product or service, such as a financial institution or a lender, then you can report to us at CFPB at consumerfinance.gov/complaint. So before we get to your questions, we want to tell you about a few free resources that you can use to help prevent scams in your community, because we are hoping that you all take the knowledge that you gain on this webinar and share it with others and spread the knowledge. So part of the Money Smart for Older Adults materials now are the Managing Someone Else's Money guides. These are 4 guides, next slide please, to help family members and friends who are financial caregivers. You can find them at consumerfinance.gov/MSEM, like managing someone else's money. And they're designed for people who are acting as agents under power of attorney, guardians, trustees, government benefits fiduciaries. They help you understand your role if you're new to it, and also help you make sure that the person whose money you're managing is avoiding fraud and exploitation to the extent you are able to help them with that. We also have a series of fraud prevention placemats, handouts, activity sheets, bookmarks, and table tents that you can order for free. These are all available in English and in Spanish, and they're really used by a lot of community groups or individuals in a variety of different ways. You can pass them out at events, you can put them up at posters. So please check them out at consumerfinance.gov/order. And on the next slide, you will see one of our new and emerging issues, which has to do with solar power related scams. The CFPB does try to stay up to date with the latest trends and issues. And so we recently issued an advisory report related to solar related scams. And in buying solar products, we've seen that homeowners are being misled into contracts with ballooning monthly payments, electricity savings lower than promised, hidden markup fees, misleading claims, and more. So please do check out the advisory and report for more information on that. Next slide, please. This is a QR code for our Office for Older Americans at the CFPB. You can get to it at consumerfinance.gov/older-americans, or just hold up your phone and scan this code to get to all of our materials. We have some more QR codes for you in a second, but first I just want to tell you about our YouTube resources. This webinar, like all of our other webinars in the network webinar series, will eventually be placed on the CFPB Live YouTube resources. We have a library of about 13, 14, or 15 webinars right now, and it's growing. Each time we do a webinar, there's a series on how to launch and enhance elder justice networks, and then others on special topics like Money Smart, age-friendly banking, and financial caregiving. The next slide has a QR code for the elder justice network related webinars. These are more for professionals who are in the elder justice field and are setting up networks in their area to combat elder financial exploitation, but anyone is welcome to look at them. They have to do with the substance and procedure of setting up networks. And on the next slide, you'll see another QR code for special topics in elder justice. So you can get more information about a whole variety of different topics. If you want to hear more about Money Smart for older adults, if you want to hear more about managing someone else's money, we also have one on housing decisions. You can check it out with that QR code. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to Ron to tell you about the Money Smart Alliance.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And this Money Smart Alliance consists of all the champions of an entire suite of Money Smart products, organizations, banks, and any kind of organization. The Money Smart Alliance serves as a way to learn how to use our free Money Smart products. Join in on webinars to help others expand their financial literacy skills, and celebrate organizations and individuals who help their communities via the Money Smart suite of resources. It's free to join the Alliance and to register for our webinar. So visit us at the website to learn more. That's fdic.gov/MoneySmart, or send us a message to consumereducation@fdic.gov to get more information, give us input, or ask us any questions. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Ben at ICF. Ben?
Thank you very much, Ron and Lisa, and thank you to all of our presenters for a very informative set of presentations. Wanted to invite all of our presenters to come back on stage, so to speak, for our question and answer session. And participants, if you have questions that you'd like our panel to consider, please do add those in the Q&A panel. We have limited time, but we very much would like to address questions that you have. Ron, you were just presenting on Money Smart for older adults, and a follow-up to the information you shared is a question that you may want to weigh in on. Who can train on Money Smart for older adults? Who are the people who train on Money Smart for older adults?
That's a great question, and that's easy to answer. So that's my favorite question. Anyone. And we mean that literally. The Money Smart suite of products, including Money Smart for older adults, was designed specifically for people who do not have formal training. They're not teachers. They don't have certified instruction credentials. It's you, it's me, it's our neighbors, anyone. So thank you, Ben.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Another question that came in was, who has the power to prevent elders from experiencing a scam? Julie, I thought you may have thoughts on that.
I think it's a village, starting with family, keeping an eye on the latest information on cyber attacks and having that your computers updated. But it's also important that the banks are trained. That teller is the first line of defense when a victim walks in. It's the banks, the adult protective services, and the police, and everyone needs to be at the table to form that, because there's so many different things that could be happening. You need to have everyone at the table to come up with solutions.
Great. Thank you, and I'll open that up to the rest of the group. Any other thoughts on who's part of the solution? And also, who should a person turn to if they suspect that they're being scammed or a loved one is being scammed?
Well, I can jump in on that for a minute. I think, we need a whole of society response to this because it's a crisis. So there is a role for every element of our society to play, from law enforcement to financial institutions to tech companies to government. And then at the individual level, the things that we can do that we talked about earlier to sort of shore up our own defenses. But even more importantly, it's sharing what you know. The more we're talking about the common scams that are out there, the less likely the people are that we talk to about it are going to experience it. And if you're feeling alone and you don't know where to go and you're not sure about something, please call the AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline, 877-908-3360.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Another question came in about the grammar used in some communications, and the questioner asked, is it true that poor grammar or unorthodox grammar is a sign of a scam communication? Panelists, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, it used to be, and it still is to some degree, but with new technologies and generative artificial intelligence, those tools can create grammatically perfect messages. They can create grammatically perfect and identical copycat websites. So those are some of the reasons we just can't trust incoming messaging right now.
I think that's a really good point. That's exactly what I was going to say as well, that it used to be that the poor grammar and misspellings were huge red flags for phishing scams. Now we don't say that as much because while they may be red flags for phishing scams, like Kathy said, people can create very legitimate, very real looking emails that look like they're coming from your bank, that look like they're coming from your loved one, that look like they're coming from anyone that you trust. So while it can be a scam, if there's grammar issues, then there are also other things you need to look out for now. And the field of AI causes these additional concerns, not only for phishing scams, but for things like voice cloning and grandparent scams, because now they can clone your grandchild's voice and make it sound even more believable. So these scams are just getting more and more sophisticated. So it is very important for everyone to share this knowledge to protect against them.
Thank you for those thoughts. Another participant is asking, how does getting your credit report protect a consumer from being scammed? Any thoughts on the role of checking one's credit report? Kathy, I believe you mentioned that people can get those for free each week.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So go to annualcreditreport.com, really for any starting point for credit reporting, figuring out how to freeze credit. That's a free, and it's a government sort of mandated website where these three credit bureaus have to honor a request for a free credit report. And like I said, it used to be you could get one every year from each of them. But now since COVID, you've been basically able to get an online version every week. And it's important because it can clue you into possibly somebody using parts of your data to begin to steal your identity and create accounts in your name. And you really want to be on top of that because that can really add up and cause major problems if it's left unchecked.
Great. Thank you. Another question, I think we have time for one more question, and this is a big topic, but a questioner is asking about powers of attorney. And Julie, this relates back to your presentation and sparked this question for the participant. How exactly does a power of attorney have usefulness in stopping a scam?
Thank you all. In my mom's case, I was able to shut down the credit cards. I was on the checking account and I was able to move money, but that allowed me to stop her charging because she was really focused on charging more. So that allowed that. And if you watch some of the hearings that have taken place from the Senate Aging Committee, they talk about people who then have been persuaded to mortgage their homes. So it allows you to be that wall between a further downfall. But people should talk to their own attorneys about what makes sense, because there are pluses and minuses on the different forms of power of attorneys. So I would, but that was very helpful for me because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to stop her charging.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, participants, for many great questions. And we're sorry that we weren't able to get to all of them. And thank you, panelists, for some of those great additional thoughts. At this point, we're ready to close our webinar, and Deborah Royster will end our webinar today. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, Ben. And thank you very much to all of our panelists who participated today and for sharing your expertise. And thank you all for listening and participating in this webinar today. Looks like 1,000 participants, which demonstrates how important this issue is to all of us. And as my colleague said, this is a joint effort. All of us have a role. Federal regulators such as our agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, will continue to exercise our authorities, working with financial institutions to hold them accountable. Financial institutions certainly have a role. We will also coordinate with our federal partners and state and local partners. Community-based organizations and stakeholder groups are critically important also, and all of us, just in terms of sharing information with those we engage with, those we know, and with our loved ones, and that will help us. This is a community, a nationwide global issue. Many of these perpetrators are operating in professional crime rings, and this is a great challenge that we will all continue to work together on. So thanks to everyone who joined us today. Have a great afternoon, and we look forward to continuing to work together on this important issue.